Captain Vera Kostrova pressed her palm against the reinforced viewport, watching the last of her cargo shuttles dock with the merchant vessel Bright Harbor. The transaction should have been routine medical supplies and terraforming equipment, in exchange for rare earth minerals from the outer colonies. Should have been. Something's wrong with their ship, muttered her first officer, Dante Ibarra, squinting at the sensor readings. Energy signatures are all over the place. And those aren't standard merchant vessel weapon mounts. Vera's jaw tightened. 23 years commanding freight runs between the core worlds. And the frontier had taught her to trust her instincts. And right now every nerve in her body screamed danger. The Bright Harbor sect is still in space, like a predator pretending to sleep. Recall the shuttles. She ordered, Captain, we're in the middle of, now Dante. Too late. The Bright Harbor's hull split open like a blooming flower, revealing rows of docking clamps that shot out on magnetic tethers. They struck the Iron Wind's hull with metallic shrieks, locking onto her ship's superstructure. Emergency klaxons wailed as the enemy vessel began to reel them in. Weapons, Vera barked. They're jamming our targeting systems, reported weapons. Officer Lysander Knox, his pale hands flying over his console. Point defense is offline. Main batteries won't lock. Through the viewport, Vera watched something that made her blood freeze. The Bright Harbor's docking bays were opening, revealing not cargo holds, but what looked like operating theaters. Sterile white tables gleamed under harsh lights, surrounded by instruments she couldn't identify but instinctively feared. Captain, Communications Officer Nalia Okafor's voice cracked. I'm picking up transmissions from the other side. It's screaming. Human screaming. The bridge fell silent except for the sound of hull plates groaning under stress as the magnetic clamps pulled them closer. Pirates, Dante whispered. Vera shook her head slowly. Pirates wanted cargo, or ransom, or quick kills. This was something else entirely. Something that prepared surgical bays before boarding their prey. How many crew on our shuttles? She asked, though she already knew the answer. 12, Nalia whispered. Including Chief Engineer Tobias Reed and half the damage control team. Vera closed her eyes. In her mind, she could already hear Tobias's laugh from yesterday's dinner. Shift, see his gap-toothed grin as he told another terrible joke about quantum mechanics. Now he was trapped aboard that floating nightmare, being pulled into those sterile chambers. Bridge to all hands, she announced over the ship's intercom. Her voice steady despite the chaos. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. This is not a standard piracy action. I repeat, this is not standard piracy. Arm yourselves and prepare for boarding. Remember your training, remember your oaths, and remember that we do not abandon our people. She switched off the comm and turned to face her remaining officers. Dante, seal all internal bulkheads. Knox, prep the armory for distribution. Okafor, keep trying to punch through their jam and get word to Colonial Command that we have a new threat. Type out here. What about the crew on the shuttles? Dante asked. Vera looked back at the viewport. The Bright Harbor was close enough. Now that she could make out figures moving behind the surgical tables, tall, elongated shapes that didn't look quite human. And on those tables, she turned away before her imagination could fill in the details. We get them back, she said simply. All of them. In whatever condition we find them. But even as she spoke, she knew with cold certainty that some fates were worse than death. The boarding pods hit the Iron Wind's hull like meteors, each impact sending shudders through the ship's frame. Vera counted 6 penetration points on the damage control display, all concentrated on Deck 7, the main cargo level. They're through the outer hull, reported Dante, his voice tight. Sealing emergency bulkheads now. Vera grabbed her sidearm and headed for the lift. Knox, you're with me. Dante, hold the bridge. If we don't make it back, you'll make it back. He interrupted. You always do. She wished she shared his confidence. The lift descended past decks 1 through 6 in tense silence. When the doors opened on 7, the acrid smell of molten metal and something else, something organic and wrong, hit them immediately. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows. Knox raised his pulse rifle, scanning the corridor. Motion sensors are picking up movement in Cargo Bay 3. They advanced carefully. their footsteps muffled by the sound of the ship's superstructure continuing to groan under the alien vessel's pull. As they approached the cargo bay, Vera heard something that made her stomach lurch, a sound like wet leather being peeled away from flesh. She held up a fist, signaling Knox to stop. Through the bay's observation window, she saw them. The boarding party consisted of 7 beings that stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in what looked like patchwork skin, different colors and textures sewn together with surgical precision. But it was what they were doing that sent ice through her veins. They had found 3 crew members who'd been working inventory when the attack began. The aliens had stripped them naked and strapped them to metal tables they'd somehow assembled in minutes. And now, with instruments that hummed with electromagnetic energy, they were carefully, methodically, removing strips of skin from the screaming humans while keeping them conscious. Jesus Christ, Knox breathed. One of the creatures looked up from its work, and Vera got her first clear look at an alien face, or what had once been a face. Its features were a grotesque collage, human eyes set above what might have been feline nostrils, all mounted on a skull that seemed to shift and writhe beneath patchwork skin. It noticed the observation window and tilted its head with curiosity. When it smiled, Vera saw that its teeth were human molars set in rows like a shark's. "They're wearing people," Knox whispered, horror bleeding through his professional composure. The creature pointed at them and chittered something to its companions. 3 of them began moving toward the corridor, where Vera and Knox waited. "Fall back to the junction," Vera ordered. "We bottle them up in the choke point." They retreated to where the corridor branched in 3 directions, taking cover behind structural supports. Knox set his rifle to maximum discharge and checked his power cell. 60 shots, he reported. "Make them count." The first alien rounded the corner with inhuman speed, its patchwork body moving with predatory grace. Knox's shot took its center mass, the pulse blast tearing through flesh and revealing the truth underneath. These weren't just wearing human skin. They had surgically grafted it onto themselves, creating hybrid abominations. The creature shrieked and kept coming, gray ichor, bleeding from the wound. Knox put 2 more shots into it before it finally dropped. The second and third came together. Having learned from their companion's fate, they bounded off the walls like spiders, their movements too fast and erratic for Knox to track effectively. One of them landed on his back, driving him to the deck while the other advanced on Vera. She drew her sidearm and fired point blank into the creature's face, watching human skin and alien bone explode in a shower of mixed fluids. But its claws were already reaching for her throat. Knox rolled hard, slamming his attacker into the bulkhead. The impact loosened its grip enough for him to bring his sidearm around and empty the clip into its torso. It released him and stumbled backward, revealing the horrific truth of its construction: human limbs grafted onto an alien torso, all held together with what looked like metallic sutures. "Captain," Knox gasped, checking his rifle. "The others in the bay, I know." Vera's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she reloaded. "We can't save them, but we can make sure these bastards pay for what they've done." They heard more, chittering from the direction of the cargo bay, followed by the sound of metal being dragged across deck plating. The remaining 4 aliens were bringing their surgical equipment into the corridor. "They want to work on us here," Knox observed. Vera activated her comm unit. "Bridge, this is the captain. Seal deck 7 completely. Emergency vent to space in 60 seconds. Captain, you're still down there. 60 seconds, Dante. That's an order." She looked at Knox, who nodded grimly. They both understood. Sometimes the only way to win was to make the victory cost more than the enemy was willing to pay. The aliens were advancing now, their surgical instruments gleaming in the emergency lighting. Confident that they had cornered their prey, they had no idea what humans were capable of when cornered. Vera counted down the seconds in her head as the 4 remaining skin-wearers advanced with their surgical tools. 45 seconds until Dante vented the deck to space. 44, 43. Knox, emergency airlock now. They sprinted toward the maintenance airlock at the far end of the corridor, the aliens pursuing with inhuman speed. Vera could hear their chittering growing more excited as they gained ground, could almost feel the electromagnetic hum of their skinning devices. 20 seconds. Knox slammed his palm against the airlock controls while Vera provided covering fire. Her shots barely slowed the creatures' whatever alien physiology lay beneath their grotesque human skin grafts. Seemed remarkably resilient to pulse weapon damage. 15 seconds. The airlock door began its agonizingly slow cycling process. The nearest alien leaped, covering 15 feet in a single bound, its claws raking across Vera's shoulder and tearing through her uniform jacket. She rolled aside and put 3 shots into its chest, finally dropping it. 10 seconds. Come on, Knox muttered, watching the door's progress indicator. 5 seconds. They dove through the partially opened airlock just as Dante's voice echoed over the ship's intercom. Emergency vent in 3, 2, 1. The sound was indescribable, a roar of escaping atmosphere mixed with alien screams that cut off abruptly. Through the airlock's small porthole, Vera watched as the 3 surviving creatures were sucked into space, their patchwork bodies spinning end over end into the void. But the victory felt hollow. She thought of the 3 crew members in the cargo bay. Had they still been alive when the atmosphere vented? Had they experienced that final terror? Or had the aliens already finished their work? Bridge to Captain, Dante's voice crackled through her comm. We've got bigger problems. That ship, it's not alone. Vera and Knox made their way back to the bridge, stepping through the resealed bulkheads and past the twisted wreckage of the boarding pods. When the lift doors opened onto the command deck, Vera saw immediately what Dante meant. The tactical display showed 6 more vessels emerging from behind the gas giant's largest moon. Each one was the same basic design as the Bright Harbor apparently. Merchant vessels that had been converted into mobile slaughterhouses. How long until they reach us? Vera asked. 18 minutes at current velocity, reported Okafor. And Captain, I've been monitoring transmissions from our captured shuttles. Vera's blood chilled. What kind of transmissions? Okafor's dark face was pale with horror. Video feeds. They're broadcasting what they're doing to our people. Chief Reed is still alive, but she couldn't finish. Vera closed her eyes, seeing Tobias's friendly face in her mind. Then she opened them, her expression hardening into something that made even her veteran crew take a step back. Show me, she said quietly. Captain, I don't think. Show me. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the sterile interior of the Bright Harbor's surgical bay. What Vera saw there would haunt her dreams for years to come, if she lived long enough to have dreams. Tobias Reed hung suspended in some kind of restraint system, his body a map of carefully precise cuts. The aliens were working on him with the methodical patience of artists, removing strips of skin and examining them under bright lights, before deciding where to graft them onto their own bodies. He was conscious, his eyes wide with agony and disbelief. But it was the other tables that made Vera's hands clench into fists. The rest of her shuttle crew lay in various stages of the aliens' process. Some were already dead, their bodies harvested. Others were being kept alive through alien medical technology. While the creatures worked. Turn it off, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The screen went dark, but the images remained burned into everyone's minds. Captain, Knox said carefully, with 7 ships, they outgun us 20 to 1. Our only chance is to run. Vera looked around the bridge at her remaining crew. Good people, all of them. People who'd followed her orders without question, who trusted her to keep them alive. The smart play was to cut the magnetic clamps, fire up the FTL drive, and jump back to colonial space. But that would mean abandoning Tobias and the others to their fate. How long can a human body survive that kind of procedure? She asked. With their medical technology keeping the subjects alive, Okafor consulted her readings. Hours, maybe days. Vera nodded slowly. Dante, bring us to battle stations. Knox, prep every weapon we have. Okafor, send a message to Colonial Command, full tactical data on these ships and what they're doing. Make sure someone knows. In case we don't make it out. Captain, Dante said, you can't be serious. This is suicide. She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the tactical display's red warnings. Those are our people over there, our friends, our family, and as long as they're alive, we don't abandon them ever. Knox checked his console. 7 minutes until The first ship enters weapons range. Then we'd better get ready to show them what happens when you skin a human's crew. Vera settled into the captain's chair. All hands, prepare for combat. Today we teach the universe why humans don't make good prey. First ship entering weapons range in 30 seconds. Knox reported, his hands steady on the targeting controls despite the impossible odds. Still no lock, they're maintaining their jamming field. Vera studied the tactical display, her mind racing through options. 7 enemy ships, each twice the size of the Iron Wind and bristling with unknown weapons. But there was something about their formation that nagged at her. They were spread too wide, probably to prevent their prey from escaping rather than to maximize firepower. Dante, cut the magnetic clamps, she ordered. Captain, if we're going to run, we're not running. We're changing the rules. She leaned forward in her chair. Knox, forget trying to target their weapons. I want you to target their docking clamps, the ones they use to grab us. Understanding dawned in Knox's eyes. Make them let go of their prize. Exactly. They can't harvest what they can't catch. The first energy beams lanced out from the approaching ships, brilliant blue-white streams that hammered the Iron Wind's shields. The ship bucked under the assault, but Vera's crew held their positions, shields at 70%, reported Dante. Target the Bright Harbor's clamps, Vera ordered. Full spread. Knox didn't hesitate. The Iron Wind's torpedo tubes spat out a full salvo 6 quantum warheads that streaked toward the alien vessel. The enemy's point defense systems managed to intercept 4 of them, but to got through. The explosions tore through the Bright Harbor's hull where the magnetic clamps were anchored. Superheated metal sprayed into space as the restraints failed, freeing the Iron Wind from the alien vessel's grip. We're loose, Dante reported with grim satisfaction. But their brief moment of triumph was shattered by what appeared on the main screen. The damage to the Bright Harbor had breached one of its surgical bays, and bodies were spilling out into space. Human bodies, some of them still moving, still alive in the vacuum. Vera watched in horror as Chief Engineer Tobias Reed tumbled past the viewport, his body a patchwork of wounds, but his eyes still aware, still conscious as the cold of space began to claim him. Dear God, Okafor whispered. The sight of her crew dying in the void while the aliens regrouped sent something dark and primal surging through Vera's chest. She'd spent her career as a merchant captain, avoiding conflict, seeking profit through negotiation and clever dealing. But watching Tobias die, watching all of them die, burned away everything civilized in her soul. Knox, she said, her voice eerily calm, target their life support systems. I want those ships turned into coffins. Captain, that's not. They made it personal when they started wearing our people. Now we return the favor. She activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the captain. I won't lie to you, we're outnumbered and outgunned. But we've seen what these bastards do to prisoners, so we're not taking any. The remaining 6 alien ships were closing in a pincer formation, their energy, weapons charging for another barrage. But something had changed in their attack pattern. They were being more careful now, trying to disable rather than destroy. They still wanted the Iron Wind's crew alive for their surgical tables. That was their mistake. Ramming speed toward the nearest ship, Vera ordered. Captain, Dante's professional composure finally cracked. That's the carrion feast. She's got heavy armor plating. Then we'll see how heavy. Vera's finger hovered over the manual override. For the ship's reactor, Knox, arm our remaining torpedoes. Set them for proximity detonation. Maximum yield. Understanding what she planned, Knox's face went pale. That'll gut both ships. Good. The Iron Wind accelerated toward the alien vessel designated Carrion Feast, her engines redlining as Vera pushed them past safe parameters. The enemy ship tried to turn away, but merchant vessels weren't built for rapid maneuvers. At the last second, Vera veered slightly to port, scraping along the alien ship's hull. The Iron Wind's starboard side was torn open by the contact, explosive decompression, venting atmosphere and debris into space. But Knox's proximity-fused torpedoes detonated against the Carrion Feast's hull, tearing massive holes in its superstructure. Through the gaping wounds, Vera could see into the alien ship's interior, and what she saw made her jaw clench with rage. Row upon row of surgical tables filled the vessel's converted cargo bays. each one occupied by a human victim in various stages of the skinning process. Hundreds of them. This wasn't just about her crew. This was an entire operation dedicated to harvesting human beings. "How many ships have they taken?" she whispered. The carrion feast was dying, its atmosphere venting through the hull breaches while aliens in makeshift environment suits tried desperately to save their victims, not out of mercy, but to preserve their harvest. "Captain," HFY's voice was tight with barely controlled fury, "I'm detecting human life signs on all the remaining ships. Hundreds of them." Vera looked at the tactical display. 5 ships left, and the Iron Wind was bleeding. Atmosphere, power fluctuating as damaged systems struggled to function. Her ship was dying, but she'd learned something crucial. The aliens' weakness was their greed. They wanted to preserve their prey. "Dante, how much power do we have left in the main reactor?" He checked his readings, understanding immediately what she was asking. "Enough for one more trick, Captain. Maybe 2 if we're lucky. Then let's make them count." She opened the comm channel again. "All hands, abandoned ship protocol is now in effect. I want everyone in the escape pods except essential bridge crew." "Captain." Knox started to protest. "That's an order. Someone needs to survive to tell Colonial Command what we found out here." Her voice softened slightly. "Go, that's not a request." As her crew began filing out, Vera turned back to the tactical display. 5 ships full of human prisoners, all depending on her next few decisions. Time to show the universe why humans were the apex predators. "Escape pods away," Dante reported, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. 23 crew members. "Clear of the ship," Vera nodded, her attention focused on the tactical display. Only she, Dante, Knox, and HFY remained on the bridge skeleton crew for a skeleton ship. The Iron Wind was dying around them, atmosphere leaking from a dozen. Hull breaches, power conduits sparking as damaged systems failed one by one. But she was still armed, still dangerous. 5 ships closing, Knox announced. "They're being more cautious now, staying at range, trying to disable us with focus beam weapons." Smart, Vera thought. They'd learned that humans were willing to die to deny their enemies a victory. But that caution would be their downfall. "HFY, I need you to do something for me," Vera said. "Use what's left of our communications array to broadcast on all frequencies everything we've seen, everything we've learned about these ships already." "On it, Captain." "But our transmitter is badly damaged. Do what you can." Vera turned to the helm. "Dante, plot a course for the center of their formation. Maximum acceleration, Captain. At our current structural integrity, those G-forces will." "I know." She looked at each of her remaining officers. "Last chance. Anyone who wants to take an escape pod, now's the time." None of them moved. "Stubborn bastards," she muttered with affection. "Knox, arm the quantum torpedoes. Set them for manual detonation. I want to control exactly when they go off." The Iron Wind surged forward, her engines screaming as they pushed the damaged ship toward the enemy fleet. The aliens responded immediately, concentrating their fire on the approaching vessel. Energy beams carved through already weakened hull plating, and Vera felt the deck buckling beneath her feet. "Hull breach on deck 4, Dante reported. "And 5, and 6, Captain, we're coming apart." "Not yet, we're not." Vera's fingers flew over her console, rerouting power from life support to engines. The bridge temperature began dropping immediately as the environmental systems failed, but they gained precious additional speed. Through the main viewport, she could see the alien ships scrambling to avoid collision. But Vera wasn't aiming for any one vessel, she was aiming for the gap between them, the point where their formation was weakest. "Torpedoes ready," Knox reported. "Wait for it." The Iron Wind shot through the center of the alien formation like a bullet, taking devastating fire from all sides. The bridge filled with smoke as control panels exploded, and Vera felt blood running down her face from flying debris. But they were through, and now the alien ships were turning to pursue, bringing them into perfect alignment. "Now, Knox, all torpedoes." 6 quantum warheads streaked back toward the pursuing fleet, their proximity sensors armed, but their detonation under manual control. The aliens' point defense systems engaged, managing to intercept 2 of the weapons, but forgot. "Through. Detonate," Vera shouted. Knox's finger came down on the trigger and space erupted in fury. The quantum warheads detonated simultaneously, creating a chain reaction of overlapping energy fields that tore through 3 of the alien ships. The vessels closest to the explosions simply vaporized, their converted surgical bays and horrific contents scattered into subatomic particles. But the remaining 2 ships survived, and now they were angry. Bone Harvest and Flesh Garden still intact, Knox reported, blood streaming from a head wound. They're closing fast. Vera looked at her dying ship. No weapons left, engines failing. Life support gone. But there was still 1 card left to play. Dante, take us back toward the bright harbor. The damaged ship. Captain, it's already dead in space. Exactly. Vera smiled grimly. Knox, do we still have manual control of the reactor? Understanding dawned in the weapons officer's eyes. You want to turn us into a bomb. A very large bomb, positioned right next to their flagship. She activated the ship-wide comm one last time. This is Captain Vera Kostrova of the merchant vessel Ironwind. To any human ships receiving this transmission, stay clear of the Kepler 442 system. The aliens here harvest human skin for grafting onto their own bodies. They keep their victims alive during the process. Do not let them take you alive. The transmission cut out as another energy beam sliced through the communications array. Bone Harvest is hailing us, Okafor reported. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, revealing one of the skin-wearing abominations. This one had arranged human facial features across its alien skull. In a grotesque parody of beauty, a woman's eyes, a child's nose, an old man's mouth, all stitched together with metallic thread. Human ship, it said in a voice that sounded like multiple people speaking at once. You will surrender now. Your crew will make excellent additions to our collection. Vera stared at the thing wearing pieces of her species and felt something cold and final settle in her chest. Go to hell, she said simply. She reached for the reactor controls, but the alien ship fired first. The beam punched through the Ironwind's failing shields and struck the bridge directly. The last thing Vera saw was Daddy's console exploding in a shower of sparks, his body thrown against the bulkhead like a broken doll. Then darkness claimed her. Vera woke to the sound of metal being cut and the distinctive electromagnetic hum of alien surgical instruments. She was strapped to one of their tables, naked and exposed under harsh surgical lights. Her head throbbed from the bridge explosion, and when she tried to move, restraints bit into her wrists and ankles. Around her, she could see the sterile interior of what had to be the Bone Harvest's primary surgical bay. Ah, the captain awakens, said a familiar multi-toned voice. The alien she'd spoken to on the view screen approached her table, its patchwork face even more horrifying up close. This creature had been collecting for a long time. Its body was a museum of human diversity. Skin tones and textures from dozens of different people grafted together in a grotesque tapestry. Your crew fought well, it continued, selecting an instrument from a nearby tray. The young male from your bridge, Dante, was it? His facial structure was particularly appealing. I'm wearing part of his forehead now. Vera's vision went red. She strained against the restraints, feeling the metal cut into her skin, not caring about the pain. And the weapons officer knocked such interesting scarring on his hands. Military service, perhaps? Those scars tell stories, and now they tell them on my skin. The creature held up what looked like a sophisticated scanner. But you, Captain, you're the prize. Command authority creates such interesting stress patterns in human skin, lines of responsibility, creases of decision-making. My collection will be much enhanced. It began running the scanner over her body, mapping areas of interest. Vera forced herself to remain still, to think. The restraints were solid. The alien was too far away to reach even if she could free herself, and the surgical bay was undoubtedly monitored. But there on the medical cart just within reach, if she could extend her right arm far enough, was a small cutting laser, probably used for precision work. Tell me, Captain, the alien continued, how many ships has your species sent to this system? We've been harvesting here for several cycles, but your vessel was unusually aggressive. Most humans simply surrender when they see what awaits them. That's because you haven't met humans like us before, Vera said, stretching her fingers toward the cart. Oh, but we have. dozens of ships, hundreds of specimens. Your species is remarkably uniform in its reactions: fear, anger, despair, resignation. You all follow the same emotional pattern. The cutting laser was just centimeters away. Vera forced herself to relax, to let her arm hang naturally while still reaching. The only variable is how long you maintain consciousness during the harvesting process. Some last mere minutes, others, the creature gestured toward the far end of the bay, where several tables held partially harvested humans who were somehow still alive. Kept conscious by alien medical technology, Vera's fingers brushed the laser's handle. I expect you'll last quite a while, Captain. Leadership requires a strong will, and strong wills provide the most interesting reactions during the process. She got a grip on the laser and slowly, carefully, began cutting through the restraint on her right wrist. The alien was facing away, preparing its instruments with the focused attention of an artist about to begin a masterpiece. Your ship's reactor core was quite damaged in our final exchange, it continued conversationally, but our engineers managed to stabilize it before complete failure. We've towed your vessel alongside ours, waste not, want not, as you humans say. The remaining crew in your escape pods provided excellent material. The restraint parted. Vera kept her arm in position, not wanting to alert the creature to her progress. 23 additional specimens, the alien mused, not the largest. Harvest, but quality over quantity. Your species' tendency toward self-sacrifice creates such interesting emotional scarring. It turned back toward her, holding what looked like a flaying knife with an electromagnetic edge. Shall we begin with your face? I'm particularly interested in those lines around your eyes, worry lines, I believe you call them. The marks of someone who has carried responsibility for others. The creature leaned over her, bringing its horrific patchwork face close enough that she could smell the preservatives, keeping its stolen skin from rotting. That was when Vera struck. She brought the cutting laser up in a sharp arc, the beam slicing through the alien's neck at the junction where human skin met its natural hide. The creature shrieked and stumbled backward, ichor fountaining from the wound. Vera rolled off the table, landing hard on the deck but managing to keep hold of the laser. Around the surgical bay, alarms began wailing as the alien's vital signs flatlined, but she wasn't done. The rage that had been building since she first saw her crew being skinned alive was a living thing in her chest, demanding blood. She advanced on the dying creature as it writhed on the deck, its stolen face contorting in agony. You want to know about human emotional scarring? She snarled, pressing the laser against its torso. Let me show you. She began cutting slowly, precisely, removing strips of human skin from the alien's body and dropping them to the deck. The creature screamed, its multi-toned voice breaking into component parts as it experienced what it had inflicted on countless others. Please, it gasped, the word coming out in perfect human pronunciation probably learned from previous victims. Please stop. Vera paused, the laser humming in her hand. Did you stop when they said please? The alien's eyes, human eyes stolen from some other victim, widened with terror. I didn't think so. Security doors were opening around the bay as more aliens rushed in. But Vera had found what she was really looking for, the control panel for the surgical bay's systems, including the one that connected to her ship's reactor. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You know what the real difference is between humans and every other species we've met? She asked the room full of approaching aliens. When you corner us, when you hurt our people, when you make it personal, we stop caring about survival and start caring about revenge. Her finger found the reactor destabilization sequence, the same one she'd been reaching for. When the bridge was destroyed, welcome to humanity. She pressed the button. The explosion that consumed the bone harvest could be seen from 3-star systems away. The Iron Wind's reactor, damaged but not destroyed, had been jury-rigged by alien engineers who didn't understand human design philosophy. When Vera triggered the destabilization sequence, the containment field didn't just fail, it inverted, creating a brief but devastating implosion that crushed both ships into a sphere of superheated plasma. The shockwave tore through the remaining alien vessel, the Flesh Garden, crippling its engines and life support systems. Without power to maintain their surgical equipment, The aliens aboard found themselves trapped with hundreds of dying human prisoners, and no way to preserve their grotesque harvest. Admiral Helena Voss of the Colonial Defense Fleet received the Iron Wind's final transmission 72 hours later. When the emergency buoy launched from the ship's escape pods finally reached a communications relay. The message was fragmentary, corrupted by radiation damage, but clear enough in its essential details. Kepler 440 to system compromised. Unknown hostile species harvesting human skin. For biological grafting. Minimum 7 ships converted for surgical operations. Estimated prisoners in hundreds. Do not attempt rescue. Recommend orbital bombardment. This is Captain Vera Kostrova, HFY Iron Wind. We do not surrender our people. We do not forget our dead. And transmission. The Admiral stared at the message for a long time before activating her fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Voss. Plot course for Kepler 442, maximum acceleration. Full fleet deployment every dreadnought, every destroyer, every carrier we have, and prep the orbital bombardment platforms. Her flag captain, Commander Torres, looked up from his console. Admiral, without confirmation of survivors. There are no survivors, Commander. Captain Kostrova made sure of that. Voss's voice was granite. But there might be more of these things out there, and I want them to understand exactly what happens when you hunt humans. The colonial fleet arrived at Kepler 440 to 6 days later to find a debris field where the alien vessels had been, and one crippled ship broadcasting a weak distress signal. The flesh garden hung dead in space, its hull breached in dozens of places. Its surgical bays now tomb quiet. Boarding parties found evidence of what the aliens had been doing surgical equipment designed for. Live harvesting, storage tanks full of preserved human skin, and computers containing records of dozens of ships that had been taken over the past several years. They also found 17 human survivors, barely alive in emergency life support pods that the aliens had been saving for future harvesting. Among the survivors was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb from the merchant vessel Distant Shore, taken 8 months earlier, when he was strong enough to speak. His testimony filled in the horrifying details of the aliens' operation. They called themselves the Grafters, he told the fleet intelligence officers, his voice barely above a whisper. They said our skin was precious to them, that human emotional scars made it more valuable for their rituals. They kept us alive as long as possible, harvesting a little at a time. He looked up at Admiral Voss with eyes that had seen too much. But that woman, the captain who destroyed their fleet, she saved us. When she triggered that explosion, it knocked out their power grid. Their preservation systems failed. And most of us who were still intact, we were able to get to the emergency pods. Admiral Voss nodded grimly. Captain Kostrova's sacrifice wasn't in vain then, Admiral. Webb continued, there's something else. The grafters, they weren't working alone. They had employers, other species that paid them to harvest specific types of humans, military personnel, ship captains, engineers. They were building a catalog. The intelligence implications sent chills through the colonial command structure. If the grafters were suppliers rather than end users, then humanity faced a much larger threat than anyone had imagined. But Webb had more to tell them. The Captain Kostrova, before she died, she did something to their computer systems, some kind of virus or program. It corrupted their client database, their harvest records, everything. She made sure they couldn't deliver what they'd already taken. And she wiped out their customer information. Admiral Voss smiled grimly. Even in death, Vera Kostrova had been fighting. The Colonial Assembly met in emergency session when the fleet returned. The footage from the alien ships, the surgical bays, the evidence of systematic harvesting, the records of missing vessels sparked outrage across human space. This is what we face, declared Assembly President Chen, addressing the packed chamber. Species that see us not as people, but as raw materials. They study our emotions, our psychology, our physical characteristics, and they harvest what they find useful. She gestured to the display showing the Iron Wind's final battle. But Captain Vera Kostrova and her crew showed them something they didn't expect to find in their catalog of human responses. They showed them what happens when you make humans desperate enough, angry enough, determined enough, the Assembly voted unanimously to establish the Deep Space Monitoring Network, a grid of automated warning buoys that would detect unusual ship movements in frontier systems. They also authorized the creation of the Kostrova Protocol's standing orders, that any colonial vessel encountering similar threats was authorized to use any means necessary to deny the enemy their objectives, but perhaps most importantly, they erected a monument at the Kepler 442 debris field, a simple marker that broadcast a message in 17 languages. Here died Captain Vera Kostrova and the crew of the Iron Wind. They watched their people being harvested alive and chose to send their killers back in pieces rather than surrender a single additional life. Let all who would hunt humanity remember, we do not forget, we do not forgive, we do not surrender our own. Years later, xenoarchaeologists studying the wreckage would discover something interesting. In the scattered remains of the alien ships, the grafters, it turned out, had been more than simple harvesters. They were artists, in their own horrific way, creating elaborate skin paintings that told the stories of their victims' lives through the scars and marks they'd accumulated. But they had made a crucial error in judgment about their human subjects. They had assumed that emotional scarring made humans weak, that the weight of responsibility and loss would make them easier to harvest. They had never encountered someone like Vera Kostrova, whose scars weren't signs of weakness, they were the accumulated strength of someone who had made hard choices and lived with the consequences. Someone who understood that sometimes the only way to protect those you care about is to make sure their enemies pay a price too high to bear. The grafters had wanted to add human determination to their collection. Instead, they discovered what it meant to be on the receiving end of it. In the end, the aliens got exactly what they had asked for, a perfect sample of human nature, delivered in the most direct way possible. They had sought to understand what made humans special, what gave them their unique emotional patterns and psychological scarring. Vera Kostrova showed them, and in doing so, she sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not raw material to be harvested. Humanity was the species that, when pushed to the edge, would drag their enemies over it with them. The grafters had learned too late that some scars run deeper than skin. They run all the way to the soul, and when you threaten what humans hold dear, those scars become weapons. Captain Vera Kostrova's final lesson to the universe was simple. We are not your victims. We are your reckoning. The stars themselves would remember that lesson, written in the expanding debris field where the Iron Wind made her last stand, carried by the solar wind to every corner of the galaxy like a promise and a warning in equal measure. Humanity had been introduced to the universe as prey. The universe would remember them as apex predators.